So here I'm back again, and look at this guy you see on my right. You know who he is. That's Dr. Dan Brubaker. Now, Dr. Dan Brubaker, as many of you already know, is world famous as one of the leading scholars on the Quran, but not just on the Quran itself. Looking at the earliest manuscripts and coming up with finding many of the changes and many of the corrections. In fact, this book right here, you need to get it. Corrections in early Quran manuscripts. This is only 20 corrections he has. He's found over 4,000. Now, he is the one that, of course, a lot of the Muslims have been confronting. They confront because this is a very academic book. It's not very long, it's only about 100 pages, but you need to get it. And I'll just put the URL right down here where you can see where you can get it on Amazon. Well, he doesn't only write books and he doesn't only do a lot of research. Look at all the books behind him. That's his library. Now, he tells me that he has opened every one of them, and I have not read them all the way through, but they're there primarily so that he can refer to them. I would love to look at my library now, look at his, and you can see who's the scholar in this group. But Daniel has come, and he's going to be doing our 6th course. Now, remember, we have 10 courses in this MAPI program, and we call it IS 501, 502, 503. This is 506, so IS 506. And it's looking at and if you look at the reference to it, it is a historical assessment of the Qur'an. That's his area of expertise. That's why we got the world's best on this subject to teach this course. Now, this course is starting on June the 16th. That's Monday, June the 16th. All of our courses are on Mondays, and we always start at 8 o'clock in the evening, Eastern Time, East Coast Time. And he will be lecturing for 2 hours from 8 to 10, and then he'll be opening up to Q&A. And I will be there along with Dr. Daniel Janosik. The three of us will be there to help answer your questions, because we want to make sure that you know that we're there live for every lecture. We promise this. This is not like other courses where you just get a canned recording. No, the material that he's coming up with is new. It keeps on changing. We know that. We see how the discussions keep changing. Therefore, we've got to keep on top of the newest material and the newest research. So that's starting on June the 16th, and it goes up till August the 11th. So August the 11th is a Monday again. 8 Mondays in a row, starting in June, going right through July, and ending on August the 11th. Now, Dan is here to unpack. And what I'm going to have him do is unpack each one of the 8 lectures or each one of the 8 weeks that he's going to be talking. Before he does, though, I just want to say, I know people get angry every time I do this, but this is only for Christians. I know that some of you who don't consider yourself a Christian, if you believe that Jesus died on the cross and rose again for your sins, feel free to take this course. This is a seminary, therefore we've got to make sure it is only Christians who come to these courses. Now, in saying that, got that over with, let's go ahead and find out exactly what he's going to be teaching. So over to you, Daniel. Walk us through each one of the 8 weeks.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Smith, and it's great to be a part of this university and teaching this course now for the 3rd time. We've done it twice before, and as you said, some things get updated and changed, as of course we're learning. I'm learning, and we're all learning together, so try to keep it fresh with all the current material that is out there, but at the same time, there are good foundations that have been built over a very long period of time that we're dealing with. And of course, the main foundation that we're looking at in this course is the Quran itself. So I'll just take a couple minutes to walk through the class. And I've taught in different settings, and as you say, this is a seminary, so this is for Christians. It's not that I don't want to teach in a place where there are people who are other than Christians. In fact, I still stay in touch with students who are from a Muslim background and from different parts of the world. In other places that I've taught. But this course is pretty special because it goes through a historical assessment of the Quran. And as Christian believers, we understand if you measure the Quran by a biblical standard that it cannot be the word of God, and Muhammad cannot be a true prophet measured by the biblical standard. But in order to properly criticize something, it's best to first understand it. And So in the course of these 8 weeks, we're going to be doing a number of different things. I'm going to walk you through just briefly what each of the 8 weeks is, but it's leading toward a specific end. And that end is that students will be prepared to properly state and engage with the Quran itself, and to intelligently discuss it with other people, both Muslims and other people who may be encountering the Quran, wondering what it is, wondering what its historical background is and its contents and so forth, and why, especially why it's a theological problem that Christians need to be aware of, and that everybody needs to be aware of, because it presents a very contrary view of the most basic foundations of the Bible, which is who Jesus is. So we're leading toward that end in the final lecture, but we're going to come around to it in the following way. So the first week, on the 16th, we're going to be doing a broad overview of the Quran. We'll be talking about what it is, what is its basic contents, what it is viewed as by Muslims, how they think of it, how they interact with it, and so forth, what it is in the life of Muslims, and also a little bit of introductory content to what is contained within it. The second week, we're going to look at the traditional views and the more critical views of the Quran's history. How did the Quran come to be in our hands today? How did it come into being, and so forth? And we'll begin by talking through the traditional account, which is the narrative of how Muhammad was living in the region of Mecca, and as a young kid growing up, and he goes off and he begins to have these revelations, realize that he's a prophet, and how it came to be written down and then transmitted from his time until our time. That's the traditional account. So it's important to understand that, because that's what most people will encounter in our world today. So you have to know what that is. And then we'll go from there and begin to look into the critical scholarship. And that is a little bit more questioning of some of those things that are taken for granted without even really challenging them by the traditional account. And it's not out of malice necessarily that people accept the traditional account. It's common knowledge. And so common knowledge, the job of scholars and academics is to test presuppositions. And that's what people have done. And so we'll talk a little bit about that in the second week. In the third week, we're going to go back over to content a little bit, and we'll begin to look at the major themes and what the Quran says, what its theological assertions are, propositions, and its major themes. What is it concerned about? If you have read the Quran, you may find that it's a little bit puzzling, especially if you compare it to having read the Bible. It's a little bit more difficult, in some cases maybe a bit more cryptic, to figure out what it's trying to say, and it doesn't necessarily follow a straight narrative. So we're going to unpack that a bit and go through the major themes and assertions of the Quran. Okay, so in the fourth week, we're going to come to a very important topic, and that is the Quran's transmission as a physical object. And it is believed by many people that the Quran was primarily, and it's commonly asserted that the Quran was primarily transmitted orally. And what they mean by that is that Muhammad spoke the Quran principally. People memorized it, they heard it, they internalized it, and then they spoke it in other people's, and so on and so forth until the present time. And that was the main and principal way that the Quran was preserved, in the memories of the people who heard it, rather than reading it and writing it. That orality certainly plays an important role in the Quran's transmission and possibly its composition. But the only way, of course, that we know about the Quran, what it said, and at a given point in time, is what was written down. So we will look at the ways in which the Quran was initially in the earliest manuscripts. I'm going to help you to understand what evidence we have from the earliest manuscripts, and then how the Quran was compiled as a book, how it progressed in terms of the script styles and the writing and the physical forms of it through the earliest years, and then coming along until the present day. It's actually the case that every printed Quran today, except for one very recent edition, has been written by hand. And so any Quran pretty much that you open up and you look at, as perfect as it looks, that was probably done by a human calligrapher, which is an interesting thing to know about that. We're going to move on from there in the fifth week, and we're going to talk about the Quran's exegesis. Now, I mentioned earlier that the Quran is cryptic in its what it says. It's sometimes difficult to understand what is going on. There's words there that are difficult, even for Arabic speakers. That, what does this mean, and what is the Quran saying? And so there's a huge tradition of exegesis, that is the interpretation of the Quran. There are commentaries, just like we have commentaries on the Bible. There are many, many commentaries on the Quran, and some of them have been very prominent. Obviously, we cannot go in one night and go through all the commentaries, but we're going to, you will understand a little bit of how the Quran is interpreted and what the major sources for the Quran's interpretation are, and sort of the process that is gone through in understanding how Muslims will come to a conclusion about what the Quran is saying at a given point when the text itself is not really that clear. We will move on from there in week 6 to talk about codicology and the textual features of the Quran. We already talked a little bit about the physical transmission, but the codicology is the form of the Quran as a book. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth, whereas we may have just touched on the script styles in that earlier week. We will, in this week, spend a little bit more time going, and you'll see some examples of the development of the script. We'll talk about how the arts of the calligraphy developed, the book production, the materials that were used, the illumination of the manuscripts, right on down through the through the history until the present time. And then finally, coming around to the end here, we have 2 more weeks. In the 7th week, we'll come directly to my area of specialization, which is the textual variants and corrections that exist in the Quran manuscripts. There are many places where Quran manuscripts have been physically altered after the point of first production. You will find those and encounter them in the book that Dr. Smith just held up a few minutes ago, and we'll talk about more of those. I'll give you some more examples that night, and talk also beyond that of the changes to the variants. There are some variants that exist in manuscripts that are not changes. They're just something that is different from the way the Quran is today. So I'll give you a little introduction and a sense of the scope of that in the Quran manuscripts. And then that leads us to our final week. Now, throughout the course, I'll be asking students to be thinking about what this all means for, as we mentioned, your communication with people about what the Quran says, how it can, so what, the so what question. And so the week 8 is the so what, the popular theological and apologetic implications. We're wrapping it all together, and I'll have you read some materials that help to, stimulate your thinking on this topic. But really the point is for you to have this much more comprehensive understanding of the Quran so that you can bring it and apply it in your life. And so that is about it. We're going to wrap it up there. You'll write a paper and have a project that you'll do that will help to solidify some of this knowledge and make it your own. But that's what we're going to be doing in the course. I'm happy to be teaching it again, and thank you so much for this chance to introduce it.
Listen, Daniel, this is great. I've gone through this course twice. This will be my 3rd time. Hearing what he's saying now and all the new stuff that he's bringing in, I'm licking my lips because, you're not going to get it from anybody better than him. Not only because he's been working on this for 20 years, but because he has gone so far and advanced so much quicker than most anybody else I know in this area. So you're getting from the best and the brightest that's there. Now, obviously, that last 8th week it really gets exciting because that's how then we apply it. And that's why all of our MAPI courses are looking to see not just getting a lot of head knowledge, great stuff to have, but how do you put it and how do you use it on the ground? Many of you are people who are on the mission field. You're out in the different cultures. You cannot use this material in certain areas because it's much too confrontational. Others of you, it's absolutely priceless for you to use this, especially if you're in Africa or in parts of Asia, all over Europe, and certainly here in North and South America. We can use this material. And so that's why we want to get as many of you as possible to come on board, to listen to this, to take the notes. Now, but hold on. Some of you are wanting to take this as a master's degree because you're part of the degree program that we have here at a Master of Arts in Apologetics and Polemics to Islam, though it's in the title. We are a master's degree level course. And that's why Daniel, who has a doctorate, myself, who has a doctorate, all of us who are teaching and who are professors, Daniel Janosik as well, we all have PhDs. Otherwise, we couldn't teach it at that level. Those of you who are on a master's degree level, you're going to have to read books. Daniel's going to give you books that you're going to have to read. He's going to give you a syllabus. We'll send it out to you once you get registered. You'll get the syllabus so that you'll be prepared to read these books, come to the lectures, and you're going to have to write and respond to what you're reading. He'll give you parts of each book or chapters for each week. You're going to have to respond also to the lectures that he is lecturing each week. And you'll be doing that on Populi, which is our platform up online. Then you'll also have to discuss amongst yourself and other students, those who are taken for a master's degree. These discussions are going to be every week. They're all online, so you can be anywhere in the world. This is the great thing about this course. It comes to you by Zoom webinar, and all your discussions and all your material and everything you're putting up is on Populi, which is again on the internet. But then at the end, after August 11th, then there's two things more you have to do. Daniel, you do have a final exam, am I correct?
Yes.
Daniel has a final exam, and we will send that to you, and then there are about 6, 7, 8 questions in it?
I don't remember. I'll have to go look at that, and it will be different this year than it has been in the past. But yeah, it'll be some questions, and some of them will involve a little bit of writing, not too much of that, but yes.
This will be an open book exam. But on top of that, then you need to write a paper. And this is a paper that actually deals with some subject about this course whose title you will have already passed to Daniel, and he will accept whether it's a good title or not. He will work that with you. That's the great thing. We wanted to make this as practical as possible, but we want it to be on this subject, on the Quran. So those of you who are master's degree, you do need to do a lot more work, obviously, because this is a academic degree and it's accredited academic degree. Now, for the cost for that, each one of these credits, this course has 3 credits. Each one is $330, but there are 3 credits plus the administrative fee. It comes to around $1,500 for this course, just this 8 weeks. But then you have 15 weeks to actually get your exam and also get your paper back to Daniel. So plenty of time to do that after the lectures are finished. Now, there are many of you who don't want to do this for an academic degree. You're not interested. Maybe you already have a master's. Maybe this is not an area that you really want to spend that much time and energy on. However, you still want to be there and you want to participate in the discussions with the MA students, and you also want to be able to read the books and put your questions out there during the week. We have a level called the audit. These are for audit students. Auditing students come to the lectures. They don't have to write any papers. They don't have to do any exam. They don't even have to read the books if they don't want to, but you can participate in the discussions during the week with the other students. That means you get to see how they're functioning. You get to see where they're going, and you get to see Daniel's responses to them. That's audit, and that costs $325 for the entire course for all 8 weeks. And it's only 8 week long for you, for the audit students. Now, there are still other students who don't really want to be part of the discussion. They're not really interested in what's going on during the week with the students. What they want to hear is just Daniel. They're only interested in his lectures and getting the PDFs and getting the PowerPoints, because he puts out a PowerPoint every week. Therefore, they are what we call personal enrichment students. These are the ones most of them are missionaries. Many of you who are at that level, you're missionaries, you're on the field. You don't want to you don't have the time or the energy, nor are you interested in a degree because you already have your degree. Personal enrichment student, you just show up for the Monday night lectures like the other groups. And the next day, I will send all of you, whether or not you're a master's degree or an audit student or a personal enrichment. Now, the personal enrichment students, you only pay $225 for the entire course. That's it. That's all you need to pay, $225. All of you, however, will get the next day the recording of Dan's lecture and also his PowerPoint and any other PDFs. We'll be putting out PDFs every week that have to do with what Dan is teaching on. PDFs that are books that he refers to, PDFs that are articles that have been written on the subject, PDFs that he recommends or that we recommend. You'll be getting all of that. So every one of you, whether or not you're a master's or an audit or a personal enrichment student, you get all of that the next day, usually on a Tuesday. Sometimes if I'm traveling and you don't get it till Wednesday. So this is what's waiting for you. But you need to register. Now, right here, you can see right down there, it is info@ves.edu. info at ves.edu. So it's just send your registration and say to Elliot, who is our registrar, Elliot, that Jay and Dan sent you to register. And you need to do this before June the 16th, before Monday, June the 16th. Can't wait to see you. Great to have as many of you as on board. Remember, this goes for 8 weeks from June the 16th up to August the 11th. Daniel, back to you. Any last things you want to say before we say goodbye to our friends?
I'm really looking forward to meeting many of you, and thank you for watching. We'll see you soon.
Okay. This is Daniel and Jay. Actually, we're just a few hundred miles apart here on the East Coast. God bless you. We'll see you in just a few weeks. This is
Thank you.
Dan, over and out.